Atomic cow snapshots and other reasons you need a file system. Last time I gave this presentation, which was Friday, which was also the first time, I had people complaining of bleeding eyes. So you are hereby warned. I had this. It's I'm not an artist. I have no color coordination. So you are hereby forewarned. If you need to avert your eyes, you need to go to another location. You need to leave altogether. You will not upset me. So, but yeah, seriously, someone said bleeding eyes. There you go, sunglasses. So, the theme of today is our Atomic Cow Snapshot superhero theme. With any good superhero theme, with any good superhero, you need to have an origin story. So I decided to go with the evolution. There was this article by this guy called Jim Salter, and he wrote it. He wrote an article in Ars Technica, and in it he had described the article is about Bitrock, and in it he had described the generations of file systems, and I thought it was a really good illustration or a good way to think of it. With generation 0, no file system. So that's why you start at 0. Their file system doesn't exist. At this point in time, there was just a stream of data. You had punch cards, you had tape, and that's not only the magnetic, like reel-to-reel tape that you see in the old movies where there's, whenever the computer is running, that the reel-to-reel tapes are going. That means it's a lot of compute power, right? But not only magnetic tape like that and cassette tapes. When I had started doing personal computers, cassette tapes were what you stored everything on. But there was also paper tape, where the tape was punched out. You recognize that? Generation 1 is the early random access. In this generation, you had multiple named files. You had at this point, you didn't have directories, but you had like a flat, a listing of files all in one location, because you only had so much size in your either floppy diskettes or whatever other little the file system. And I remember, I don't know if it was Hans Reiser came up with it, or he just was the first to implement it in Linux with Reiser FS. And I'd heard that he was going to incorporate, the journal or some sort of log and transactions. The ideas that you have in databases and implement into a file system. The benefit of the journal is that if it crashes or there's a power failure, you don't lose the data if you ever had it. So you have the journal where you're about to write something to the disk. You put it in the journal first, you write it to the disk, then you mark it in the journal that you have completed it. That way, if it crashes in the middle of any of these operations, you can either replay the journal and fix the disk, or you throw that journal entry out, if that makes sense. Okay, sorry. With the journal, you're less likely to lose your new data or newly changed data. So like I said, Reiser FS was the first that I'd ever actually heard of it. I don't know if JFS, the journal file system that IBM had created, I don't know, they may have been the one that had originated it. It was eventually incorporated into ext3, which was made ext4, the 4th extended file system on Linux. And then, of course, modern NTFS also has journaling, current day NTFS. So, next generation of file systems. Yeah, this is the current where we're at right now. File systems, the next generation. Incorporated in this are a lot of new features. You've got volume management. You've got per block checksumming, self-healing redundant arrays, atomic cow snapshots, the theme of tonight's discussion, asynchronous replication, and far future scalability. Volume management has been around for a while. It's been in Microsoft Volume Snapshot Service and Logical or LVM in Linux. But this generation is the first to incorporate into the file system. It's always been a lower layer external. Per block checksumming is very important to this generation of file system. I'll explain a little more about that later. Self-healing redundant arrays. We know this as RAID. I mean, that's what the RA and RAID stands for, is redundant arrays. Again, incorporating it now into the file system and not just having it as a layer below. Atomic cow snapshots, I'll talk about more of that later, but this time the snapshots can be incremental instead of having to ship the entire snapshot over the wire wherever you're sending it to. Asynchronous replication and far future scalability. I'll explain all of these in the future here in a couple slides. So the examples for tonight's presentation are ZFS and Butterface. ZFS originally stood for Zettabyte File System. It's now, what it now stands for is ZFS. Some people say ZFS if you have a British accent. That was created by Sun at the time. They had started working on it in 2001. It was released in 2005 with Open Solaris by Sun. And then Butterface. This is also called the B-tree file system, which is what it stands for, or Butterfs or BTRFS. I think Butterface is much funnier than the rest of those, so that's what I'm going to call it. So there it is. The development on it had started in 2007 and was released or incorporated into the Linux kernel in 2009. It was started by Oracle Corporation. Eventually, other companies came in, Red Hat, Ubuntu, all these other people. By the time it was released in 2009, it was really the whole community. Interesting to note, and maybe completely unrelated, but I have a theory about this, is that Oracle bought Sun in 2009. Now, is it the people that jumped ship? Because a lot of people jumped ship whenever Oracle bought Sun. Could it be that they worked for these other companies and brought what they knew from Sun and incorporated it into this? I don't know. My own personal theory. I have nothing to base that on. It's just the timing seems very interesting.
Well, is there much ZFS in Butterface?
A lot of the concepts are crossed. I mean, so this entire talk, I'm talking about both of them. They do them slightly differently, but they all essentially do volume management, atomic cow snapshots. They all do all these sorts of things. So it's like this is good. Maybe we'll do it in a different algorithm, or we'll call it a different name. One of the problems that you have between these two file systems is what operating systems you can put them on. With ZFS, it came out on Open Solaris. Then it was released on Solaris. Eventually, it got onto the BSDs and incorporated that way. It got onto I think Mac OS has a version of it. ZFS was released under the CUDL license, CDDL, community, I don't know, it was Sun's license. But CUDL is not compatible with GPL2. So you can't put it into the Linux tree, the kernel tree, and you can't package them together because the two licenses conflict. So Butterface is maybe a replacement for it. Butterface lives on Linux and is built in Linux. I think it's also been ported over to ReactOS. Has anyone ever heard of that, ReactOS? Mm-hmm. It's like Windows. Yeah. It's an open source Windows. Mm-hmm. CFS, not only the BSDs, but there's Open Indiana and Illumos, which is what Open Solaris eventually became when Sun and Oracle nixed it. Code's out there now, so a group and became Open Indiana. Anyway, I digress. So our heroes for tonight's program is ZFS and Butterface. Now, if you're gonna have heroes, you gotta have a good villain, right? Tonight's villains, and the villain that we all live with is Bitrock. Again, I apologize, you can't read it, but trust me, that's what that says. Bitrock, also called bit decay or data rot. And these are your silent, random changes to your files that you don't even know about until you look at it much later and get truly annoyed with, and you can't, it just really makes you angry. Bitrock, one of its superpowers is that it's backup proof. By that, I mean, if there's a change to a file and you back it up, you get that change along with the backup into your backup. It's also RAID proof. RAID was designed for around the drives, right? So it's a redundant array of inexpensive or inexpensive drives is what it originally stood for. But anyway, the drive. So RAID really is meant to be if the drive fails, not if a bit inside the drive fails. If you have like RAID 5, 6, 7, you may have a parity stripe, but is that parity checked on every read? Some controllers, not necessarily. Some controllers, yes, but not necessarily all of them. And if there is something bad, there's a bit that is flipped. How do you know which drive it is? The RAID controller has to figure that out. And is it always right whenever it figures out? Could it be something wrong with the parity stripe? These are all questions. Some of the causes of bit rot: cosmic rays, alpha particles, neutrinos, right? Those are on the quantum scale, right? And that's just because drives are in the universe. We all have neutrinos passing through us right now. And sometimes they interact, maybe cause cancer, who knows, right? On the microscopic scale, so going up from the quantum to the microscopic, you got electric charge and magnetic orientation that can decay. It just flips. It just changes. So if you've got solid state drive, does the electric charge always stay on there? Let's hope. If it's magnetic media, hard disk, that may flip somehow. It went into a magnetic field or something, or neutrino, right? On the macroscopic scale, you've got literal decay. I mean, and rotting. So you think back to the punch cards. They're made of wood, right? So they're going to rot. The paper tape also going to rot. You got magnetic media. Or tape will also disintegrate. When I was working at a movie theater in the late 80s, my boss had said to me one time, the original copies of Star Wars are all yellowing now. And I was kind of distraught by that. But I mean, in 10 years, just the chemical composition of film at the time, they had yellowed, it started rotting. So just stuff made out of the universe just oxidizes. Some people call hard drives spinning rust, and there's a reason for that: oxidation. Made out of materials and material science, and stuff it just goes bad. So in this article that I had read by this gentleman by the name of Jim Salter, one of his prized photos of his son, he named it Genesis of a Supervillain. You see his son's pretty mad, that far right one. He put this file on a VM disk and just edited the file, flipped one bit. And you can see right there, half of it completely messed up. He changed 2 bits. 3/4 of it is not, just compared to the original. And then the 3 bits, the whole thing's lost. Just 3 bits, and the whole thing is lost. Our next villain is the big data blob. We call it the blob, essentially scalability. We've got large files now. Who knew 10, 15 years ago that we were going to have, that virtual machines were going to be so prevalent that we were going to have a file that represents several hundred gigabyte virtual disks, right? So we've got several hundred gigabyte size files now. Then you've got, in addition to that, with big data, you're collecting a lot of sources of, information, the Internet of Things, all this stuff, collecting data. If you've just got in your house, your phone, your garage door, and your security system, and your thermostat, and your toaster, sending to your centralized hub, whatever that is, that's a lot of individual little files, or maybe even large files. A lot of data, big data. And then storage is getting better. That's just Moore's law, right? So in the middle here, I've got a picture, kind of a goofy picture, right, of Bill Gates in '94 for National Geographic. And he was representing in 1994 how much a CD would hold in comparison to a printout of what was on that CD. So it's a stupid picture, right? But it illustrates, how things move along. This other picture, I've got micro SD card, same form factor, but in the process of 9 years, went from 128 megabytes to 128 gigabytes, factor of 1,000, right? Same form factor, but just to illustrate, same happening to hard drives, same happening to solid state drives, same happening to everything, right? So that's the part of the blob. And another villain is Chronos, Father Time. Whenever you copy a file on one file system, how long does it take if it's a large file? I did a copy of an ISO file for RHEL. It was a 4 gig ISO file, and just copied it right next to each other. Gave it a .2 extension. Took me, 40 seconds. Not long, but that's 40 seconds that I'll never get back because I'm just waiting on the copy, right? As your files get bigger and as you have more, it just takes time to copy it. If you're doing backups, and especially if you're doing it off-site, how long does it take to get your entire backup off-site? It just takes time, a lot of time. If your RAID array crashes or one of the drives starts to be a little weird, I remember having to rebuild a RAID array, and it would estimating 18 hours rebuild time. Well, how am I going to keep up my nines, right? Taking a snapshot takes time. I'm doing patching on the first Thursday of every month at work, and I do a VMware snapshot of each of the machines that I'm doing patching on. And although I'm going to be doing patching at 11 o'clock that night, I set my snapshotting for noon, just to be sure that it's done in time for the patching. It just takes time. And then, of course, time is the culprit to literal rotting. As time goes on, things are just going to get worse. Boy, putting a bleak picture out here, aren't I? Wow. That's right. So our superheroes, they have superpowers. First of all, they are copy on write file systems, CAL. That's what the CAL stands for, copy on write. And so I've got, what's the note? Modified blocks written in new blocks. So with a copy on write file system, all right, so when you have a new file, all file systems, they put it in the new blocks. The blocks that are unused, it puts the file into those blocks. With a copy on write file system, if you change a file and rewrite it, it puts it in unused blocks and just ignores the rest of them. Or it may just take just the changed blocks and write that into a new block that's unused. So that's what copy on write does. Instead of reading that block and writing back over it, it writes it on another block somewhere else. Snapshots in these next generation file systems. They are atomic. In other words, they are indivisible. They are almost instantaneous, which is why they're so quick. The way that snapshots are done in ZFS and Butterface is basically the inode table and all the blocks that those inodes are pointing to is saved. So the current inode table keeps going, but the previous list of all the inodes and all the blocks that those inodes are for gets saved to the side. So the blocks are still used and not reused, but you're not taking up any additional space. Is any of this making sense? So all right, so the snapshot, what it does for a snapshot, instead of actually copying the entire file system, all the files that are in it, it just reports the record of the, inodes. Yeah. Okay, so the inodes and the blocks are what's put to the side. You create I don't know if it's a file or whatever. You put the table to the side, and that is your snapshot. And the snapshot points to where everything was at the time that you took the snapshot. And your current inode table points to where the current blocks are. Is that a little clearer? But the benefit of that is you can have multiple versions. You can have multiple snapshots. The problem is that, as you're going along, all these copy on write blocks, all the blocks that are used by all the snapshots are still in use. So you can't write your next write onto those because they're in use. Problem that I have, let me explain. The problem that I have, I do a nightly snapshot. And although DF shows that I have, that I'm only using 75% of my disk, the disk is full because according to my current living file system, I've got 75% in use, but those other 25% are referred to in my snapshots. Is that making a little more sense? So I'm going a little too far with that. And exact condition at the time, no extra space is taken. Yeah, so snapshot, let's say you've got a 2 terabyte hard disk. Yes.
You just said you lost 25% of your disk to your inode snapshot, and then you said it doesn't take any extra space.
Until stuff changes.
Until stuff changes, yes, thank you. Until stuff changes, right. So what I do is I delete my snapshots that are older than a week.
Is it like recording dirty blocks, and that's how it knows what the people record of?
It's like that, yeah. Yeah, it keeps a record. It keeps a record of in-use blocks, yes, and whether they be in use by the living file system or by the snapshot. So I delete the snapshot, and then all these ones that were in use before now get freed up, and so DF doesn't change because it's still 75%. But what I meant by no extra space is if you have a 2 terabyte disk file system, you don't need to have an additional 2 terabyte disk to make a snapshot of it. So that's a little unclear, and thank you for pointing that out. So I'm going to change that next version. So the theme of tonight is atomic cow snapshots. That's where it came from, atomic cow snapshots. And I just thought that phrase, atomic cow snapshots, when someone had introduced that to me, I was like, you mean a snapshot of an atomic cow? No. So that's why I went with this stupid theme. Another superpower is replication. You can send and receive with these file systems. They have their very own send and receive commands. And this replication is incremental. So whenever you do a backup, you take a snapshot and you send it to your remote location. It's going to take the full amount of time, your first time, right? Because you've got to copy all that data over. The second time, however, when you do the send and it does the receive, only the delta gets sent, the delta of the changed blocks, right? So it's going to be a lot more quicker, a lot more quick. It's fast, fast. So that's one of the benefits of the next generation file system is incremental replication instead of always sending the whole thing over. It's just going to send the delta. Another superpower is data healing. Mutant data healing, SNCD. And the way this is possible, what's that?
Merkle trees.
It's through Merkle trees, that's right. So if you haven't heard of Merkle trees, which I had not before, I knew the concept, I didn't know it was called a Merkle tree, but The concept of a Merkle tree is when you've got a tree, some data structure that is a tree, for each child node, you take a hash of it and you store that hash in its parent, right? So a parent has multiple hashes of all of its children. Then you take a hash of the parent, which includes all the child hashes, and you give it to its parent. And you just do that through that's what this Merkle tree is. Merkle trees, incidentally, are also used in Git. They're also used in Bitcoin, in the block, I think it's the blockchain uses. So Merkle tree is a standard algorithm that's used a lot now. So with ZFS and Butterface, they have this checksum that is read at every read. So at every read, it checks to make sure that it's right. If it's not right, it fixes it. And it does it in the background. I'm going to skip one. Well, all right, so I'm going to skip down. It does it in the background. You see here these lines in a log. This is in Jim's article, where you see checksum failed on inode 258, and this is what the checksum is, and reads it again, and then it corrects it on that last line. Read error corrected, inode 258, and done. So how long did that take? 0.0007 seconds to fix. The way it does that, as I've explained, it does the checksum and knows what's on the block. It knows about the redundant copies. If you're doing striping, it knows all of its copies, and it fixes it. It's just amazing. Another superpower I had mentioned before was volume management. This is not only on the physical side, where it understands. Oh my goodness! Volume. Oh look, it messed up. Okay, sorry. Not only the physical drives, the file system talks to the drivers and to the physical drives themselves, but it also presents them as logical drives. This is stuff that's been done before, but again, this is incorporated now into the file system. Another superpower is block level RAID. I put RAID in quotes because it's not really RAID, right? It's done inside the file system. The striping may not necessarily go by drive. The striping may not necessarily go by the drive. It may go depending on where it thinks is the best place. Whichever blocks are either closest or furthest, or some algorithm that I don't know about. These file systems, they do striping, mirroring, striping with parity, striping with double parity, triple parity, quadruple parity. They also can do striping of mirrors. All these things we know of as RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 5, 6, 7, and RAID 10 or 1 plus 0. In Butterface, Butterface calls them RAID 1, RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 5, RAID 6, 7, RAID 10. Well, ZFS, they decided to go with their own scheme. They decided to call it a stripe, a mirror. Right, so those make sense. A RAID Z, a RAID Z2, and a RAID Z3. If you want to do RAID 10 in ZFS, you have to create mirrors and make a stripe of those mirrors. So just a different philosophy for the different names. Some other superpowers are encryption on data disk, encryption at rest, compression, and there are multiple algorithms, multiple compression schemes that it understands, and deduplication. I'm not sure if in Butterface it's completely vetted yet, but in ZFS it is, but I know that data deduplication on ZFS requires a lot of RAM and a lot of CPU. So if you got a dedicated machine, you throw a ton of RAM at it, and it'll be doing deduplication. So is that kind of? I've heard a lot of people say that don't even worry about deduplication, just go with compression. If you're worried about losing space on your disks, just use compression. Don't mess with the deduplication because you got to think it's got to compare every block or well, there's a better algorithm than that, but for every file or every block, you gotta somehow compare it with all the other blocks so that you don't duplicate it. Yeah, but in ZFS, just go with compression. At least that's what I've heard. Another superpower is scalability. So you're not tied to the media of the time. The storage size of drives are increasing, as I had mentioned before. But only the blocks get only the new blocks get put in new locations. That's right. So there's kind of like deduplication, but not quite. Anyway, but I did this. I did this the other night. I didn't even know it was there, and I had a rel CD ISO file. It was 3.9 gigs. It took me 20 seconds to copy it with a .2 extension, right? It took me 0.002 seconds whenever I did it with the ref link of a copy. It was awesome. So I'm going to start using that a lot more now because I've got Butterface on this laptop, my desktop at home, my work computer. Creating a read-only snapshot is as simple as doing a Butterface subvolume snapshot -R for read-only, your source subvolume, and then your destination subvolume. Snapshots are subvolumes in Butterface. They're a special kind of subvolume, but it's just a matter of just doing a subvolume snapshot and then source and destination. If you're gonna copy over your snapshot, you need to have it as read-only. Excuse me. And when I say, I mean replicate, the next section here. And to replicate from one place to another, whether that be on site or whether it be, your remote location, your disaster recovery area. It's just a matter of doing a Butterface send on one side and a Butterface receive on the other side. So you see here, I've got, this is kind of I guess you consider the first one a pull. So you SSH to that guy, do a sudo Butterface send with the name, and pipe it to sudo Butterface receive here. Right? Does this make sense? So I'm issuing an SSH command of sudo Butterface send, and then here I'm doing a sudo Butterface receive. On the other side, if you want to do it from this direction, you just do a microphone. Doing I'm going to do a Butterface send, pipe it to SSH over there to do a Butterface receive, and it sends it that way. And again, like I said, this is incremental. This is the first time it's going to take forever, right? Because I got 2 terabytes or whatever size disk I want to send over there. It's going to take this, whatever my bandwidth is. That's how long it's going to take. But the next time, only the blocks that have been changed are going to get sent. In Butterface, that was nothing. With RAID, you have to have the exact same size disks when you do a RAID. There's some variation in that, but if you want to do a RAID, you have to have 1 terabyte disk, 1 terabyte disk, 1 terabyte disk. It's good if they're same brand, maybe sometimes, not necessarily. Some people think that they should be different brands because you never know when when they're going to die on you. So, but with ZFS and Butterface, doesn't matter. Put a 1 terabyte in, put a 1.5 terabyte in, put a 2 terabyte in, put a 4 terabyte in. It's all going to do its striping magic. It's going to put more stripes on the 4 probably, and redistribute it how it wants to. Instead of with the RAID, it's a hardware, it's a disk. But I diverge. And so in Butterface, you can dynamically, not ZFS, in Butterface you can dynamically add these disks. In ZFS, you're going to have to, if you're going to add a new disk, you're going to have to create a brand new file system. But in Butterface, you just do a device add, and then you do, if you want to change it from what it was to, from just a simple disk to a RAID 1, you just do a balance, and it converts it to a RAID 1. You add a second drive, and you want to make it a RAID 5, you do dev add, device add, and then you do a Butterface balance. and convert it to a RAID 5. So you can go from a RAID 1 to a RAID 5. As you're adding disks, you want to add a fourth disk, so let's make it RAID 10. So we go from RAID 5 to RAID 10. Pretty awesome. So, yeah, and there's my awful looking reference. Any questions? This is the end of my presentation. Yes, sir.
I would not recommend RAID 5 for Butterfs. RAID 5 and 6 sub. It's been declared to be unsafe and will require rewrite. So,
Oh, is that right?
yeah, so, mix and match your ones and zeros in different orders, but yeah, it's if it's data that you care about and developing that process around that.
So you do your backup before you try it out. But then you've got the backup offsite anyway.
Not ready for prime time.
Yeah, there's a lot of development that's still happening in Butterface. And like I said, they're adding new algorithms for compression. They're doing better at the RAID 5 and 6 and 7 stuff. It's stable in general, but there are specifics that it's not so stable. And at least that's what I've heard of. ZFS is rock solid. A lot of people love it. And
is there any concern about the ownership though anymore? I know in years past there were concerns about ties to Oracle and how free it was, free as in question mark,
Yeah, I don't know. Ubuntu has actually put it in their distribution now. It's a binary blob that you put in with it. So, and the legal team is still out on that. As of what I saw, I think was September of last year. So, yes, sir.
Is the original author of Butterface in jail for murder?
Sir? Not Butterface. No, you're thinking Rising.
Yeah.
Hans Rising.
Murder by whatever it is.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just seeing big follow this lead and just did finish development. It's still a mistake.
I'm not going to justify that.